Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're with us in class today. We're broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. I'm delighted to be broadcasting 2 hours today with Deborah Tavares, StopTheCrime.net. StopTheCrime.net. Deborah Tavares is a broadcaster. She's a freelance investigative reporter. She's going to be telling us about live what's happening in California, where 8,000 homes have been destroyed. People are homeless. She's going to tell us about that. And we're going to talk about so many things that will curl your hair. No kidding. Please, don't touch that dial. Deborah Tavares, welcome.
Well, thank you, Vince, for having me on the program today. And I certainly would like to recommend that everyone go to our website, stopthecrime.net, subscribe. We're blasting out YouTubes almost every other day because of the enormity of what is happening here and what is happening like what's happening here in your town right now. So as you hear me talk about the Northern California directed energy weapon hit on this area, it's important to know that weather events that are, of course, artificially created, they call it climate change, but it's artificially created, and they're using directed energy weapons and the magnitude of all kinds of assaults with the weather systems. And this is global. This is not just in the United States. This is global. We recently traveled to Russia, and we also traveled to South America just to see if these things were happening elsewhere with our own eyes, and they are. Russia has smart meters. Russia has cell phone towers. Russia has weather manipulation, just as we do here. The only thing about our visit to Russia, or one of the many things, is that the Russian people know that their government is altering the weather. And they believe it's for a good thing, because when the Russians have celebrations, which was during a time that we were there, the weather is manipulated so that the Russians can be outside and celebrate. And they know that there are many, many rubles that are spent on the government manipulation of the weather. Sadly, not as many Americans are aware as the Russian people are about the manipulation of the weather. But having that been said, I am broadcasting today from Northern California, the wine country, the Santa Rosa, Napa area that was hit on October the 8th with directed energy weapons. How do we know that? Well, 2.5 years prior to the assault with lasers and beamed weapons here, our group found an email exchange between the California Public Utility Commission and Pacific Gas and Electric. And it's extremely important that you understand Pacific Gas and Electric is run by Rothschild. In fact, if you dig deeply, you will find that the majority of utility companies across this country are run by some level of Rothschild influence. And I will say that because that is one reason that the United States electric grid has not been hardened against an EMP attack. China and Russia and Canada have all hardened. We have not, because Rothschild plans to use everything in their power to take our country down. And why I say that is we have a announcement from Rothschild. It's the plan to restructure Northern California. And it is horrific when you look at the plan, because they're moving in with intention in 2018 now to restructure the United States of America. Of course, it's a global restructuring plan, but they're setting up shop in Silicon Valley, and they're going to be creating resilient cities. And this is extremely important to understand, and I'm going to explain that because of everything that I could tell you today, besides everything else I'm going to tell you today. The resilient cities is utmost to understand and to know this is the transformation in your cities right now by the corporate setup of your city councils, your board of supervisors, in fact, all agencies, healthcare, education. It doesn't matter how you can check to see that you are being fooled through false science and through a nest of dangerous and killing agencies throughout our country is simply do this. Type in the name of your school board, for example, and type in their policies for climate change or global warming or the requirements to reduce CO2 emissions or your carbon footprint. And you'll find that they've all ascribed to that. You will find that even HUD has ascribed to climate change. Now, it's most important to understand we've been getting the words wrong. Climate change, think about this in tandem to the reality that that means too many people using too much stuff. Again, too many people using too much stuff. So what does that mean? It's a genocide program. And I will tell you, you need to go and look at the genocide treaty that we have on YouTube. Type in genocide treaty, Deborah Tavares. You will be stunned. And I'll just give you a few sentences about that, but I encourage you to help get this out far and wide to everybody you know. The bottom line with the genocide treaty that was signed by 90-some-odd nations in the late 40s and not signed on to until 1988 by Regan through his administration, because the United States held off on signing it for decades because of the dangerous aspect of the treaty. It allows for complete annihilation of entire countries of people. We're talking genocide on a wide basis where races can be wiped out, countries of people can be wiped out. And we're seeing genocide every day. And it's important to understand the one requirement for the genocide treaty is one's own country cannot genocide its own people. And this underscores the need for everyone that is listening now to understand we do not have the United States of America, a sovereign country, as we thought and as we have been programmed to believe we have. We are being operated by a stealth group of think tanks and universities that are positioned globally that write policy. And what do I mean by that, Vince? What I mean is we discovered on the RAND, R-A-N-D, corporation website, and everyone needs to understand RAND. RAND is a think tank, and it is a group of foreign investors. It is a group of it's universities. It's all levels. And the RAND works for and gets money from the U.S. government and other countries around the world. And the RAND writes policies for our government. And I was stunned to find that out, to learn that. But it's most important when we hear that our assumed elected officials, which they're not, they're put in place just as part of a show. It's like watching a daytime soap opera with elected officials because there is no sovereign government, and our votes are our votes for our demise because of the accelerated programs to destroy our health and our lives and move us off of our lands. So we have elected officials on every level that are following policies from organizations like the RAND. The RAND is home-based in Santa Monica, California. That would be Southern California. And the RAND is positioned globally. I am releasing a YouTube, actually, today, which is why I'm recommending that you subscribe to stopthecrime.net so you get our blast, which will go into more detail about the RAND. But I'm going to be covering many topics right now, and the RAND, not the detail that I would like, but I will tell you this. The RAND writes policies for congressmen so that when they're on their summer breaks, they can read the recommendations of the RAND, researchers and experts. We're talking about health. We're talking about other policies such as the armament with nuclear situations in Iran and Iraq. And they write about education policies, and they say this is your summer reading when you're on break, so you can come back in the fall and push through these policies. This is what they're saying to our congressmen, your summer reading, so that you will be equipped for policies in the fall. So that is the mechanism, or one of many of the mechanisms, that is pushing through policies that we don't understand. We scratch our heads that that our presumed elected officials are signing on to things that they admit they haven't read. So when they say they haven't read these things, who's writing them? The RAND and other universities and the network of Rothschild and Rockefeller. That's who's writing this. That's why all the policies in all of our cities globally are based on climate change, the need to reduce our carbon footprint and our CO2 emissions, which is false science. That, of course, as I said earlier, is artificial control of the weather globally. So we're going to get into some things here in Northern California that you need to understand is part of the program for resilient cities, and I'm going to describe those after the break.
Deborah Tavares is with us. StopTheCrime.net. StopTheCrime.net. Please subscribe. We'll be right back. Deborah Tavares is with us. Deborah, I just posted on our YouTube account your YouTube video, the plan to burn up Northern California. I just sent it to 5,000 of our closest friends on YouTube. And I'll post it on the website, usaprepares.com, during the next, 10 minutes or so. Deborah Tavares, please continue.
Yes, well, also, Vince, post the genocide treaty, Deborah Tavares, also, so that everyone understands what I said prior to the break about one's own country cannot kill its own people, and the importance to understand that we do not have a country. I don't know if you'd ever interviewed James Traficant, but he died a few years ago, and I met him at a conference here in Northern California, and he worked very hard to get out information in the congressional record, and his book is entitled America's Last Minuteman. And it's very important that we stand on the shoulders of people that knew from prior people that they understood this information from, that we honor them by doing what his work was all about. He was desperate to get in the record what had happened to the United States. And as a result, he was put in prison for 7 years on trumped-up charges and nearly killed in prison. He was offered an early release from prison, but he refused because he had to admit wrongdoing, and he did not have wrongdoing. So, as I say, he was nearly killed in prison. Look up James Traficant for yourself. He was a congressman out of Ohio, and on the front of his book, James A. Traficant, Jr., he was a quarterback, a congressman, a convict, and a political prisoner, and those are his words. And here's what he entered in to Congressional Record, and I'm going to read a little bit of this to you out of his book, The Bankruptcy of the United States. Mr. Speaker, well, I want to say that this was entered into Congressional Record on March 17th of 1993, volume 33, page H-1303. And the speaker again was James Traficant, Jr. from Ohio, and he was addressing the House. Quote, Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9th, 1933, declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent. In the Congressional Record, June 5th of 1933, a joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments, and it's further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. All United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under emergency war powers. The federal government exists in name only. With the congressional Republican form of government now dissolved, the receivers of the bankruptcy have adopted a new form of government for the United States. This new form of government is known as a democracy, being an established socialist communist order under a new governor for America. This act was instituted and established by transferring and or placing the office of the Secretary of Treasury to that of Governor of the International Monetary Fund. And it goes on, gold and silver was such a powerful money during the founding of the United States of America that the founding fathers declared that only gold or silver coins can be money in America. This is just part of what James Traficant entered into record, and I would certainly have everyone aware that the United States was actually dissolved during the Civil War. But he alludes, of course, to the bankruptcy in 1933. I see we're coming up on
Deborah,
break.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back with Deborah Tavares. Deborah Tavares is with us, class. I just posted on the website, usaprepares.com, usaprepares.com. The plan to burn up Northern California, the link is there, page 1. And the link for the genocide treaty is there. Both of them are YouTube videos for your viewing education. Deborah, I remember James Traficant dying in what they called an accident on his farm.
Yes, in his barn,
and
his tractor.
Yeah, and you know, I've got tractors here on our farm, and I've never tipped one over. Never have I tipped one over. And
well,
I
certainly
understand
that is a very suspicious death, for sure.
Yes.
But
yes.
What James had been doing and what he served in prison, being falsely accused of getting this information out, is so important for everyone to understand. And I was talking about his book called America's Last Minuteman, and I read you some of what he got into Congressional Record. But it's important to know the bottom line. Everything the corporations and international bankers have been doing is a fraud, it's a lie, and it's genocide, and we're paying for it. And the overall agenda of disinformation, of course, and manipulation by the controllers, the international bankers, Rothschild and Rockefeller and more, is to centralize control of all of us, all people, actually all flesh, all blood on the planet, including plants, GMO, etc. But to control all people, flesh on the planet, land, energy, all resources, water. We're seeing now the intention to create water wars, and certainly we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But to control all technologies and economies. And we've got to expose the hidden secrets of corporations, the universities and institutions that are controlling all emerging technologies that will rebuild the world's transportation, civil, manufacturing, and physical infrastructure with cyber infrastructure, computers, networks, and sensors. We're going to talk about this. This is a transhumanism agenda, and everyone needs to understand that. We are in desperate times of being altered. Our DNA is being altered. So I'm going to step into Resilient Cities right now, because this is now the plan moving into all your cities. And it's all based on hitmen teams coming in, being called consultants. Your cities are hiring consultants to bring these plans in. And the entire basis of these plans lie on consensus. What is consensus? Well, I'll tell you. When I attempted to get on a citizens advisory board here in Sonoma County about water, I was told that this was the criteria and the agreement of which I had to agree to in order to be invited on this board of citizens, that I would agree with the majority of the decision on the issue, and that if I had an opposing viewpoint, that I would agree that the majority would win. And of course, I could not do that. And that is what consensus is. It is literally the understanding that you have to agree with the majority. This is the Delphi technique, and it's starting, and it has been in our cities for many, many decades. It's a global plan. Again, this is all part of what the RAND Corporation has brought into this country from the Tavistock Institute. This is for predetermining outcomes of policies in your cities that you are led to believe that you have public input on. It's important to understand that your cities take grants. They are furthering your requirements of debt in your cities. And all of those grants require your cities to allow public comment. That's why we're getting frustrated when we're lining up in droves on an issue. And normally many cities will give 3 minutes, but oftentimes we're reduced to 2 minutes or 1 minute because they do not listen to us, and they roll over us with policies that we're not agreeing to. But in a sense, we are agreeing. Sadly, the majority of people believe that they have elected their city council members and their county board of supervisors, and by voting. And the same thing in Washington, by voting. We're voting in, as I said earlier, the lies, because we only exist as the United States in name only. And so we are voting in this genocide program. Remember, too many people using too much stuff. It's genocide. And I want to build into much of the work that I had done on climate action plans. You can type in Deborah Tavares in YouTube on climate action plans. You'll hear a lot of work that I've done on that. Basically, the climate action plans is a sustainable plan to promote the agenda of the bankers, again, through the RAND Corporation and the Delphi meetings and techniques that I've just been talking about. Consensus, again, to determine the outcomes. And the Delphi meetings are structured, controlled, and facilitated by hired hitmen that come in to your community. I can only equal what is happening by saying that you need to understand what the hitman teams are doing and the danger to all of our communities with these hired hitmen. They change countries globally. They take over resources globally. And they're here in the United States, and they have amped up the takeover by the use of increased weather weapons. The normal verbiage here in Northern California, and certainly from Governor Brown, is that we are at a new normal in climate change. And climate change, again, it's weaponized weather. And we're being told that there will be many more fires, as we have already seen here in Northern California and in the Santa Barbara, Montecito area. We're being told that. And they're killing the trees because of the overhead aerial spraying and the forest management that they have not done. And we are in massive trouble throughout the country. Whether you're being burned out by fires, storms, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, it doesn't matter. They're amping all of this up, not only the United States, but elsewhere. And when I spoke about climate action plans in the past, you can check. Your city has already adopted that. They've already accepted the grant money from Rockefeller and Rothschild to approve climate action plans. Just type in the name of your city, followed by sustainable development or climate action plans or energy action plans. There are different names for it, but your city has approved it. They've approved the false science of climate change. So I'm going to explain it like this, because my background is in multifamily construction. We had our own business for many decades, and I'm used to thinking it in terms of a plan, a set of plans that you're going to build a house with. When you get a set of plans from an architect, you pay that architect for that set of plans. In this instance, it is the climate action plans that all of your cities have approved, and they've taken the grant money. So they have an obligation to go forward with these plans that have been sitting there and causing massive stagnation throughout the globe, because we are in a massive homeless crisis now. We don't have housing here in Northern California for the fire victims. Literally, people that lived in million-dollar homes are homeless. They're moving around from house to house because Airbnb was set up by Google to literally absorb all of your local housing and not provide for local people to live in rentals month to month. Google offered those people that were under Google contracts during the fires to release them from the Google agreement or the Airbnb agreement. For free, the owners could offer their homes to the fire victims for a limited time. Many people that I know that were burned out of Fountain Grove, that was the very expensive area above the Hilton Hotel that you probably remember that was burned down before the fire leaped the 101 freeway and burned out 1,500 homes in Coffey Park. Those people on Fountain Grove are moving from Airbnb home to Airbnb home. They're only able to maybe stay in these homes for a week, and then the homes are rented to someone else from some other country or from out of state so that people can be in the wine country. This is a way, this has been a plan. There is no mistake that our rental housing has been absorbed by Google in the plans to constantly create migration. One of the mottos of Airbnb basically says that your home is anywhere and everywhere and nowhere at all. And it's important to understand the multitude of plans that surround us. So I'm getting back into the fact that now we're seeing plans based on resilient cities that are requiring zero energy, zero waste. It's important to understand there is no such thing. The U.S. Department of Energy, in their energy efficiency renewable energy page 83, says this: sustainability is not the same thing as zero energy. There is no such thing as zero energy. Energy does not exist in a vacuum. It always comes from somewhere and goes somewhere. Because there is always a cost to energy, trade-offs are inevitable in order to find a harmonious balance that offers the greatest efficiency and least impact on the environment. This is the ultimate goal, to not use energy. The most efficient energy is energy we do not generate. This is not a technology. It is a behavior modification or learning to live in a new reality. And again, this is in the U.S. Department of Energy, their Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy section, page 83. Zero energy means zero people, because people are energy too. And it's important to understand what these resilient cities are bringing in to your town. More on resilience when we come back.
As I hope you heard what Deborah just said. Zero energy equals zero people. We'll be right back. Deborah Tavares is with us. Deborah, I'd like to underscore something that you've said. Bill Gates came up with an equation, how to get to zero carbon emissions. Bill Gates getting to zero carbon emissions. And he said there's a simple equation for that. Okay? P times S times E times C equals carbon dioxide. P stands for the number of people. S stands for the services per person. E stands for the energy per service. And C stands for the carbon per unit energy. So to get to zero, which he wants to do by the year 2100, in order for carbon dioxide to get to zero, all population must die.
That's
all population must die.
Vince, of everyone watching the Genocide Treaty by Deborah Tavares. And again, go to stopthecrime.net, scroll down to our YouTube channel, and look at all of the new YouTubes that we have up, and we will talk about that in the next hour. But I was illustrating the climate action plans that all of our cities have adopted as being an architectural plan that has not yet been built entirely. It has the definitions of reducing CO2 emissions and our carbon footprint through the Paris climate agreements. But what everyone has to understand, of course, this is all based on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon footprint, which is false science. And with these plans, the reduction of CO2 emissions, it is necessary, as you just said, to suspend, kill all life on the planet. And that is the plan. It really is the plan. We are moving into a transhumanism agenda. We'll talk about that. But now they're moving into building the plan that your cities have taken grants and agreed to put forth. And those plans now coming in are through resiliency. Right after the fires here in Northern California, we started to see large billboards that have the word resilience on it. Now, everybody here in Northern California looked at it as surviving this monolithic attack on us. They had no idea that you just had to add resilience cities behind that word, and you would see what is being brought in here and in your town right now. But again, I alluded earlier in the program about the press release from Rothschild Global Advisory. I want to tell you what it says. Rothschild names 2 new co-heads for restructuring North America. And it says one of the world's leading independent financial groups, Rothschild Global Advisory, has announced that they have promoted these co-heads for restructuring North America, effective immediately. They have been part of the senior leadership of the firm's restructuring practice for many years and will continue to be based in New York. Their names are Homer Parkhill and Stephen Antonini. And they go, over the past year, Rothschild has taken significant steps in strengthening and expanding its presence in North America as global head of technology and will lead the firm's new office in Silicon Valley. Again, effective immediately. So what is resilience? Well, it's the control of all resources in the United States. And they're telling us that this is for our benefit that they're bringing in resilience. So I'm going to read to you now what's on the Resilient Cities website with the definition of urban resilience. This is city resilience. They say cities face a growing range of adversities and challenges in the 21st century. From the effects of climate change, again, they're using weather weapons, all right? With the effects of climate change growing, migrant populations to inadequate infrastructure to pandemics, which they are creating, to cyber attacks. Resilience is what helps the city adapt and transform in the face of these challenges, helping cities to prepare for both the expected and unexpected. They're waging weather weapons on us. They're moving us out of our rural lands. They're seizing control of the water supply right now. We're going to have water rationing very soon. And they say it depends. Urban resilience is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, and businesses and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kinds of chronic stressors or acute shocks they experience. So they're going to use economic hitmen. They're going to use your CAFR accounts in your cities that are double bookkeeping.
Deborah, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. Deborah Tavares is with us. She's a freelance investigative reporter. Website, stopthecrime.net. Deborah, I want to put an exclamation point on something that you just said. And I'm feeling this firsthand, very much like you're feeling the fires in Northern California. You mentioned that the plan is to drive us off our rural land. Well, a lot of us in Missouri raise cows. And so we raise animals for food. And our cows, just as everyone else's, feed on grass. They graze. And when they eat the grass, they leave behind cow poop on the fields. And we rotate our cows every couple of days. We let them eat, and then we move them to another field. Well, what happens is the mama cows lie down at night and rest. Well, they lie down near or close to these cow pies, and there's bacteria on the ground. The bacteria gets on the mama's cow's nipples. The young calves drink from their mama cows. They get bacteria, and they get something called a bacterial diarrhea. Okay, well, that's easy to treat. All you do is go up to the calf, and you put a bolus, an antibiotic bolus, a large pill down their throat, and everything's good. Okay, well, why am I telling you this? There is no calf bolus of any brand anywhere in the United States right now. All gone. And I've called everywhere. I can't get any. The veterinarians can't get any. There's none to be had. And there's a silence as to why this is happening. No one can figure it out.
It's happening because rural lands are considered sprawl. And anything that results from rural farmlands is to be eliminated to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to ascribe to now what I'm talking about, the resilient city plans. We're not going to be able to literally have our own food supply. Everything will be GMO'd. Everything will be positioned in the geographic of things by the desires of the controllers. We will not be allowed to grow or raise our own food. They're taking control of the food supply, the water supply, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. But I wanted to finish the conversation on the definition of city resilience because it's extremely important for everyone to understand. We are all being told we are in a new normal of increased climate change, and we're all experiencing historical amounts of increased weather weaponization. And they're saying in the climate action or in the resilient city discussion that building urban resilience requires looking at a city holistically, understanding the systems that make up the city and the interdependencies and risks that they face. By strengthening the underlying fabric of a city and better understanding the potential shocks and stresses cities face, a city can improve its development trajectory and the well-being of its citizens. And here's what they describe as the new normal of chronic stresses in our cities, all based on weaponization of the weather, of course, okay? They're saying that the chronic stressors are slow-moving disasters that weaken the fabric of a city, and they include high unemployment. Again, this is a design to reduce employment. In fact, I will add right now that sadly, the lowering of the corporate tax and the illusion that the corporations were, for a moment, giving humans $1,000 benefit from lowering the tax basis. Many of the corporations are now bringing in more robotization. So this is eliminating jobs for humans. But another stress besides high unemployment overtaxed or inefficient public transportation systems. They talk about violence within our cities increasing, chronic food and water shortages, which they are creating, just what you were saying in the beginning, Vince, of not being able to sustain your ability to take care of your livestock. They go on to tell us about the acute shocks. They say, on the other hand, acute shocks are sudden, sharp events that threaten a city, which include earthquakes, floods, disease outbreaks, and terrorist attacks. Now, I'm going to certainly recommend that everyone go to a YouTube that we recently put up. It's extremely, extremely important. It's entitled Earthquake, EMP, which means electromagnetic pulse, and 5G attack plans. Again, earthquake, EMP, 5G attack plans, and more. That's on YouTube, and you need to take a look at this. So they go on to tell us the challenges that our cities face aren't often a single shock or stress, because they're outlining up above all the things they're going to be doing. But they say most cities face a combination of challenges which can contribute and do contribute to further threatening of a city's resilience. Now, I'm going to say what your mayors and your city leaders in your cities and your counties are going to agree to. They are going to be funding these plans. The cities are going to agree, and this is absolutely horrific. You can look this up for yourself, but we will have it out on YouTube. There is a 10% resilient pledge, and the 10% pledge requires that mayors and or city leaders make a very ambitious commitment to city resilience, and the most ambitious in history, promising 10% of their city's annual budgets annually towards resilient goals and projects without raising funds or taxes. Of course, that's not true. The cities will raise taxes. But in exchange for this pledge, the cities will get $5 million. Very important. $5 million that they will then be required to spend on resilient plans and resilient activities. And the cities must reinvest, again, the $5 million in funding to current resilient building projects as well as new resilient projects. So we just found on the Montecito Community website in Santa Barbara County this extremely important piece of information, and I'm going to read this to you. Montecito in Santa Barbara County was recently assaulted by weather weapons, floods, certainly directed energy weapons likely as well, and the smart meters. The smart meters here in Sonoma County were all part of the cause of the fires as well as the laser hit, because those smart meters explode, and when they have pulsed delivery of electricity, they explode. And that is not being discussed as any part of the consideration for suing Pacific Gas and Electric, Rothschild. I'll throw in right now that Rothschild doesn't avail himself to admission of responsibility unless there's an alternative plan. And Rothschild said that they did not cut back the vegetation as they should have around some of the power lines. So why would Rothschild mislead the people and redirect what the cause of the fire was? Because Rothschild controls the weather. They have permits here in Northern California for cloud seeding, for the idea that they are enhancing rain to fill up the reservoirs for hydroelectricity. But Rothschild controls Weather Central. And the idea of the trees is to get people so frightened to have vegetation that they remove the trees around their properties, because this is so horrific here. Unless you're on the ground walking through these burn zones, you do not realize the enormity of what has happened here in Sonoma County and in Santa Rosa. There is no way that pictures from afar illustrate and demonstrate what is happening. None at all. It is horrific. And I will say to you that Montecito just issued this, and it says, Montecito community asked to provide a vision for rebuilding. Now, I'm going down to the third paragraph here, but this was just a newly released vision request. They say that January's winter storm and subsequent debris flows forever changed the landscape in and around Montecito, again in Santa Barbara County. But those who live and work there say the devastating event has bolstered their determination to come out of the disaster better and stronger. In an effort to capture the spirit, community members are being afforded an opportunity to voice their thoughts on how to rebuild. Here's the third paragraph in this. Quote, what has transpired in Montecito, Santa Barbara County, over the last 3 weeks has been a nightmare. But we now have an opportunity to respond to this nightmare as a community. They say, but. After they say and admit that this was a devastating situation, all of you saw the fires and the floods and the landslides and the death. And they admit to this, but then they say, but, which negates their concern over the nightmare. But we now have an opportunity to respond to this nightmare as a community and harness the astounding, creative, philanthropic energy here to create a stronger, more resilient Montecito for the future. To make this happen, we need the involvement of every single person who is willing to put in the work. Again, resilient cities. They're happening everywhere. One of the reasons why we have high-priced housing is because thousands and thousands of homes across the country have been devastated by one energy weapon hit or weather weapons hit or another. Here in Sonoma County, the fires have changed the real estate market dramatically. There's no housing. There's none at all. People are living in trailers. There's thousands of people living in trailers, parking where they can. And then we were just told in last weekend's newspaper, which we all suspected, that the soil and the water supplies are contaminated. In Fountain Grove, again, the community above where the Hilton Hotel burned down, the families whose homes survived, which was not many, only 5% of the homes survived in the Fountain Grove area, again, above the Hilton, before it jumped the freeway and destroyed a large portion of Coffey Park. They're now bringing in bottled water. And here's what they're saying. There's benzene in the water supply. Benzene is a central nervous function disruptor, and an extensive hemorrhaging, causes extensive hemorrhaging, and it increases the risks for cancer. And the fire area, they say that the government levels above 500 parts per billion, you should,
Hold that thought. We're going to a break. Deborah Tavares is with us. And, Deborah, I have some anecdotal evidence about the importance of what you're saying. You know, if you're over the target, you tend to take flack. Well, I attempted to post more links to your videos on YouTube, and this has never happened before. Now I get a 405 error. Not allowed. I get another error establishing a database connection. And I looked up the error, and it's a result of malware. Just happened. So I can't update our website with the links at this moment. So I just want to let you know they are listening, they are paying attention to what you're saying, and they don't like it.
Well, I've got to get back into the poisoning of the water supply and the soil here in Northern California. This not only was the use of directed energy weapons and weather weapons, but it is also the use of poisoning the groundwater and the soil. The properties, unbeknownst to the people that are trying to rebuild, number one of the major builders that was set to come here to rebuild 75 of the over 5,000 homes pulled out the other day because they cannot get enough labor for framing. This is going to happen, and we're not going to be able to replace these homes. But when you look at the toxic levels in the groundwater and in the soil, it would be deadly to move back into these areas. In fact, many of the homes on the peripheral of the burn zones that survived, we were told, should have their insulation removed out of their walls, not only their ceilings, but have the carpets, pads, and subfloors removed because they are so toxic. Now, the insurance companies, again, run by Rothschild, are saying, well, you can just shampoo your carpets. And the insurance companies are fighting with homeowners that want to bring down the toxic levels, as demonstrated by people that are coming and measuring for the air pollution and the danger. And the insurance companies don't want to pay for that. What we have happening here right now is tremendous shortfalls in coverage. Many of these people that ran out at 1 and 2 in the morning to save their lives in their pajamas, barely escaping because their neighbor knocked on their door. It's important to understand on Fountain Grove there was no cell phone reception. There was nothing. There was not even water in the hydrants. There was no water. And people were running door to door to wake their neighbors up so they could flee the fires that were burning so quickly. It was unimaginable. The firefighters are saying they've never seen a burn like this. We talked to a fire battalion chief. He said in his entire career, he never saw a fire burn so rapidly, so hot, and so fast. I asked him to describe what he saw in Coffey Park. He said it looked like lava, like water flowing, but it was fire, and it was going everywhere. And he said he felt hopeless and helpless. He has never experienced anything like this. They could not get ahead of these fires. They watched our city burning up. But now we're contending with amounts of benzene in the water supply when we're being told that the low-level amount of toxins that you can consume is 5 parts per billion. It was tested in the burn areas to be 918 parts per billion. These are going to be Superfund toxic sites. What are they doing? The FEMA, which is again part of the genocide program, is going in there with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they're trucking out the poisons from these sites and taking it to our local landfill. They're removing all the concrete footings and foundations. Those are going to rock quarries to be reused, Vincent, to be sent back into the community to be reused. Now, it's been suggested that the high heat of the fires has changed the load capacities of this concrete because it was so badly burned with the high heat. But I can say to you that at this moment, Sonoma County the residents do not fully understand what they're facing because they are many suffering from PTSD. They've lost everything. And again, there's no housing. Many people are having to work through their insurance policies locally by living in hotels, living, as I said earlier, in trailers. It is horrific. It is heartbreaking to see what has happened here to good and decent people through resilient plans and the use of weather weapons. Make no mistake, this is happening globally. And this is just a way in which to bring in the diabolical programs of Rothschild and Rockefeller, a.k.a. set to destroy us.
Deborah Tavares is with us. StopTheCrime.net. StopTheCrime.net. Also, search on YouTube for her videos. Deborah, you mentioned rock quarries to store the rubble from the contaminated rubble from the foundations. Well,
yeah, all the concrete. It's being repurposed and recycled.
Right. I have a comment about that. You know, a rock quarry is a hole in the ground, and it's a very bad location to store contaminated toxic waste because what happens is water will collect there, and it will form a leachate to make a toxic soup to further contaminate the groundwater.
That's the intention, Vincent. I also want to have everybody please go to YouTube, type in flu, biological weapon attack. Flu, biological weapon attack. Understand that what has been happening nationwide with the flu and also with our animals as well is a biological weapon attack. Please get that out far and wide. Please help us get our YouTubes out far and wide. Yes, Vincent, we're having trouble keeping our YouTubes up. But I want to go on to say this. The San Francisco Chronicle has told us that because of the huge wildfires, it's wiping out California's greenhouse gas gains. It says over the course of just a few weeks, The major fires have pumped more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than Californians' many climate change programs can save in 12 months. Scientists debate whether California's vast forests are emitting more carbon dioxide through fires than they absorb through plant growth. Now, I've got to say this right now. This is extremely important. Check this in your towns now, because as I said earlier, the utilities predominantly through the United States are run by Rothschild. And you can type in, for example, Pacific Gas and Electric and Rothschild, and you'll find that a Rothschild CEO sits on the board of Pacific Gas and Electric. The same thing with Edison International. Rothschild is involved there as well, and they are involved in most of the utilities across the country. But it's important to understand that before the fires, Pacific Gas and Electric was authorized by the California Public Utility Commission to raise rates on the time of use program through the smart meters. So between the hours of 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., we will all be charged more money. Now, I checked in Nevada, and that same increase has happened now in Nevada. We will be paying more for utilities as they tighten up our inability to access resources because of cost. This is going to increase homelessness nationwide, in fact, globally. And again, Poverty Inc. is an illustration of how all these homelessness and poverty is all a market. It is a market. Go and watch Poverty Inc. You need to understand what good-meaning Americans are doing by adopting children from foreign countries. It's decimating their families. It looks like a good thing to do, but the families don't have enough food to feed their children, so they're giving them away. They don't want to. So watch Poverty Inc. This is horrific. But I want to say that, again, Pacific Gas and Electric knew in advance of these fires because of the YouTube, the plan to burn up Northern California. They planned to burn up Northern California, just as they will be using all the dead and dying trees that they're killing with the aerosol spraying concoction, which is killing the trees. We have millions and millions of dead trees. So what we're finding, Vincent, is that, sadly, now they're restricting the water. Many of you may have heard about day zero, that the water's being shut off in South Africa, and locals are lining up to fill water jugs, and they're going to have water reduction. We're going to have water shortages and controls here in the United States, but they have set it up so that we will be controlled through the smart appliances and faucets, where when your usage meets your optimum, the amount that you're allotted per day per person, they can shut your faucets, showers, every smart appliance in your home off. It's important to understand that the appliances now are going to be voice controlled, and they're going to transmit your usage, which will be shut off by your utilities. They have voice control lighting now in all of our homes. They even have, Kohler has a new smart mirror that utilizes Alexa to upgrade your daily routine. You can use Alexa to program in your shower heads. This is the enormity of control. Now, why? Why are they hitting the trees globally? Because of 5G. 5G is a network that is going to connect to our synapses and turn us into fully operable humans, cyborgs. This is the plan. Go to the NASA War document on stopthecrime.net. The NASA War document, it's a Circa Warfare Plan 2025. I've talked about it ad nauseum. The title of this is called Robots, Cyborgs, and Humans, and they're eliminating humans. So they must reduce the trees because the 5G network is going to be set up in all the large cities throughout the country. Right now, Verizon is doing it here in Santa Rosa. These small 5G network is to be set up, they're small, on phone poles, on light poles, on rooftops, everywhere. And they have to be about 830 feet apart. in order to transmit the necessary mind-controlling and physically altering properties of the frequencies on our bodies and pets. You can look at, again, I urge you to look at some of the YouTubes that we have up. We talk about this on IEEE, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. You can type in 5G to understand it. Again, the three things that must be eliminated for 5G to work is we must be off our rural lands, we must eliminate the trees so that the 5G can penetrate our homes, go through our walls, and when it rains, 5G is not as effective, so hence the droughts. This is a plan, and this is a horrific plan. And Vincent, I'm going to read something, because when we went a few years ago down to Dominican College, we got some information that at the time was so horrific that it was hard for me to process it. But I'm going to read this now to everybody. The emergence of a planet-wide electronic communications grid connecting the thoughts, feelings of billions of people and linking them to a rapidly expanding volumes of data, to a fast-growing web of sensors being embedded secretly throughout the world, and to increasingly intelligent devices, robots, and thinking machines, the smartest of which already exceed the capabilities of humans in performing a growing list of discrete mental tasks, and may soon surpass humans in the manifestations of intelligence. We have always assumed that we, humans, would remain the unique province of our species, and we're not. Also goes on to say this: the emergence of a revolutionary new set of powerful biology, biochemical, genetic, and materials science technologies that are enabling the elites to reconstitute the molecular design of all solid matter, reweave the fabric of life itself, alter the physical form, traits, characteristics, and properties of plants, animals, and people, and seize active control over evolution, cross the ancient lines dividing species, and invent entirely new ones never imagined in nature. And this is what the NASA War document has told us that I've been talking about for years. It talks about creating a new evolution of humans. It tells us that. The Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document is the declaration for war. It is a genocide plan against silent weapons for quiet wars. That is the declaration. This tells us in that document what needs to happen to us for us to be right for the taking. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from page 7. The quality of education, this is again from Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, page 7. The quality of education given to the lower class, that's all of us, must be of the poorest sort, so that the moat of ignorance, isolating the inferior class from the superior class, is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright, lower-class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of societal order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. And this is what was presented in 1954 by Rockefeller, certainly the international bankers, the United States Air Force, and more. And I would recommend everybody read this 40-some-odd page document. It's not a lot to read, but you will understand what is happening. Rockefeller said, and this is a quote, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers, a.k.a. slaves." Well, they go on to tell us that the aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment at all. It is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. We have been reduced in our mental capacity. We have. And it is important to understand the NASA War document has told us this. When I first found this about 8 years ago, and I was talking with Trevor Coppola, which is up on YouTube, I was talking about this then. And everyone needs to go to stopthecrime.net and take a look at, it's called the Warfare Strategy Document, and the Future is Now, and you'll find it under the NASA War Document, which is what we call it. But very important to understand that this was discussed as a PowerPoint 2 months before 9/11 by Dennis Bushnell, the chief scientist of NASA Langley Research Center. And on page 4 it says, this presentation is based in all cases upon existing data, trends, analysis, and technologies. He says no pixie dust, robots, cyborgs, and humans. On page 9, humans have taken over and vastly shortened evolution, and they will redirect evolution, and they have. And Vincent, this is horrific. Everyone needs to know what is happening so that people can make some decisions. We have a new YouTube that was just out on LED lighting.
Class, Deborah Tavares is with us. Let me spell her name. Deborah. Last name Tavares. Website stopthecrime.net. Deborah, you've got the balance of the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As I said, I want to leave the program with two things. One horrific thing right now and one good thing. I want everybody to understand what Sinomix is. Senomyx. It is added to many foods and beverages, and we do not want to be consuming this. Are you ever wondering what is happening with Planned Parenthood and all the aborted fetuses globally? It's ending up in our food supply. And here's what happened. Under the Obama administration, a shocking decision, was handed down on February 28th of 2012. And again, it was Obama's Security and Exchange Commission. They ruled that PepsiCo could use aborted fetal tissue and remains of aborted fetuses in their research and development agreement with Sinomix to produce flavor enhancers, and it falls under, quote, ordinary business operations. So it is a flavor enhancer. The corporate location is in La Jolla in Southern California, and they're adding aborted fetal tissue to our food supply. When you type in what is Sinomix on stopthecrime.net, you will get a list of all of the food products that this is in. It's important to understand that we're cannibalizing our own, and that it increases anger throughout the society. But here are just a few things that I'm going to mention that are products that Sinomix is in. They go on to say PepsiCo products include Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Aquafina, juices like Tropicana, Dole, Ocean Spray, Lipton teas, Quaker Oats cereals, granola bars, Frito-Lays, Cheetos, Ruffles, Gatorade, and some coffees, such as Seattle's Best Coffee. It's also in many of the chocolates, Cadbury's. It is also in crackers, in cookies. It's in ice cream products. You can read these for yourself. I would please recommend you download this and do not eat this. Do not consume, do not be a cannibal on aborted fetuses. So moving into the good news at the end here, it's very, very important to understand we do not have a water shortage. Water is a renewable. I would recommend everyone please go to our website, primarywater.org. Also type in Primary Water Explained in YouTube. Primary Water Explained. At least teach your children that the globalists are trying to create the illusion of peak water, just like they did with peak oil. Oil never came from dead dinosaurs. Water is a renewable. Again, we do not have a shortage. And right now in California, they are set to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on creating at least 13 dams, as well as a water tunnel to deliver poisonous, toxic, atmospheric water, which they will lace with all kinds of chemicals, fluoride, chlorine, everything. This is what they're doing. It's necessary expense to keep us in the illusion that we only have a secondary water cycle, which is rain and snowmelt. The primary water cycle is when water is created deep within the mantle of the earth through synthesis of hydrogen and oxygen and under tremendous pressure from the earth's internal heat. The H2O in the form of vapor is forced upwards through rock fissures and other areas in the earth's crust, and it's becoming liquid as it cools. Primary water is forced upward, while atmospheric water is subject to the effects of gravity and flows downward. It's important to understand primary water is easy to access when you have the correct drilling site. We are the water planet. All our land is essentially floating on water. And the atmospheric water, rain and snowmelt, is as a result of the evaporation of primary water. Teach your children a scientific truth, because we are headed now for severe water regulation. And this is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net. Please help us stay moving forward with updates from Sonoma County and global events. Help to contribute financially to our web team that we're all doing this on a voluntary basis. Thank you.